This podcast is sponsored by Wahoo, the first company to ever get me excited about a treadmill. Look, we all know that there's nothing quite like running outside, but the Wahoo Kicker Run is the next best thing. It's a high-performance treadmill that responds to your running pace in real time. And that's not like other treadmills. You know, if you want other treadmills to do anything, you have to press buttons. But in the Kicker Run's run free mode, a sensor actually tailors the treadmill speed to your current running pace. So you can quickly accelerate or slow down without constantly pushing buttons. It's pretty much like you were running outside. Now, the first time I tried the Kicker Run, I couldn't believe how smooth it felt under my feet as I cruised at its fastest speed, 4 minutes per mile.
Dude, you lasted like 30 seconds at 4 minutes a mile.
It was like 45. Now, the Wahoo Kicker Run also integrates with a whole range of apps, including the interactive fitness platform Zwift Run, which takes you on a virtual course with real gradients, pace feedback, and other runners from across the world. And here's the best part. It allows you to properly keep up with your training on cold, wet, and stormy days, without awkward pace changes or desperate stares at the clock. And so when the spring finally comes, you're ready for race day.
Hold on. So that means that I can get to the Boston Marathon actually healthy and fit for the first time ever?
Exactly. Thanks to Wahoo for sponsoring this podcast.
All right, I'm joined by my colleague Alex Cyr for our instant reaction podcast of the New York City Marathon. Alex, I am literally still glued to the seat that I've been sitting in for the last few hours covering the race live. I'm a few feet away from the finish line in the media center. If you're watching a video version of this podcast right now, that explains the strange lighting around my head and the multitude of people around me. So I don't know if you can hear all the chatter, but we just finished up with the press conferences. So let's just do this, man. Let's talk about what happened in these elite races and what a day it was.
Oh my God. Yeah, when you say instant, you pulled me out of a walk towards the sushi place and said, we got to go now. So here we are. This is as legit as it gets. Okay, well, you're on the ground, Michael. Can you tell me why it seemed like everyone was down to start these races super slowly this year at the marathon? I think that's kind of the one enduring theme between the men's and women's races. These were like pedestrian races at the start that led to wicked negative splits. I was at home trying to like catch both races at the same time, and they seemed to ramp up just around the same time, like post 21K. They led to amazing finishes. What was in the air? It was cold? Like, is this why that everything kind of started off pretty slowly?
No, I think what actually ended up happening is it's sort of like a ripple effect, right? Like, because there's no pacers in New York, no one has to lay their cards on the table the night before. Like, so for those of you listening and watching that are not like ultra nerds when it comes to elite running, basically the elite fields have this like meeting. They call it the technical meeting, where they all get together in a room the day before. And the main reason they get together is to talk about what the pacers are going to do for them the next day. And in that moment, that's when it's revealed, hey, I'm going to try to break a world record, or hey, we're going to run relatively slowly because, you know, I've actually been a bit injured or whatever. So New York does not have pacers. It's championship style racing, much like if you watch the Olympic marathon. So nobody has to reveal their cards. And it becomes this weird kind of like pensive guessing game amongst the top runners in the field. And it definitely played out in both races, right? Like we saw big negative splits on both sides. The men's race in particular was quite negative. A lot of the runners, the top runners, had to run pretty massive negative splits in order to place, say, in the top 10. We had just minutes ago, Connor Mantz, the top American finisher, who finished just under 209. He negative split by like a couple of minutes, I think. And he was pretty frustrated by it, actually. Chatting in the front group, there was a lot of chatter going on. And he even heard some other runners saying to each other, like, what if we just go right now? What if we take off? And will anybody go with us? Will anybody match the move? Can we get away from this pack? And I think part of the reason for that is there was a hope and a feeling by a lot of these runners that it's a really good day for running. It was like perfect weather, mid 40s. Weather didn't really shift all morning. It was a bit sunny, but very low humidity, very low wind. It was like a banner day for running a PR. So I think in his case, he was sort of itching to run fast because I know he's very fit, and it just didn't come to be. So just a strange thing when races just don't end up being fast, right?
Yeah, well, you could tell it may be out. We look at the men's first, maybe, because that's what struck me the most. Like, whereas the women kind of had the regular cast of characters in the front for most of it, the men's race looked so antsy because we had like, I don't know what, 12 different leaders at different points of the race. You could tell after the first 10K mark, and I think it was really at 10K that we could tell that the race was going to end up being pretty slow. I think they split 10K at around 212 pace. And just around there, even though you expect a negative split, you can already tell that the end result is going to be a little bit slower than someone like Mance would have wanted, not to mention all the defending champions that were in the field. And then shortly after that, between like 10K and the half, you started seeing like random people, like no disrespect to them, but not people you would expect to win the race, take the lead and inject some pace. So you had CJ Albertson, the American who's known to run at weird, like tactical ways. That was like, okay, he's going to put his stamp on the race. That's cool. But then you had Rory Linkletter, the Canadian, take the lead for a little while. You had Frank Lara, who I think most watchers might not know who that is. He's an ultra runner who I think was maybe posting better results a few years ago, like put his stamp on the race just past the halfway mark, wearing like Ultra shoes, which is like a trail dominant company. And then you had Wesley Kiptoo, who produced the best result out of all of these early leaders, the Hoka athlete who's not that far removed from a varsity career, taking the lead at one point. And so then you could tell, okay, this doesn't just feel easy for your favorites, but also for like 15, 20, 25 men deep, which made for an interesting second half.
Yeah, sure did. Yeah. And I mean, I think that the second half, much like with the women's race, to a degree kind of shook out as we imagined it would, with some of the heavy hitters in there. Like obviously there was a sense, at least in the room, in the media room, that like when Tamara Tola took the lead in the second half, like it almost was like, is this the foregone conclusion that this guy is just going to sew up like one of the big years of all time in distance running by winning both the Olympics and one of the big majors, the New York City Marathon, in the same calendar year? Obviously, he didn't quite have the gas in the tank to pull that off, but it made for a pretty exciting second half. Like, I think the neatest thing in all of this was like the jubilant vibe when Abdi Nagier won, and his post-race interview, and just up here moments ago in the media room doing the press conference. Guy's super bubbly, really chatty, super well-spoken guy. And he was kind of doing the like nobody believes in us thing, where he was like, it's a little bit of a sports underdog cliche story where he was like, he's like, he flamed out in Paris. He stepped off the course at one point in Paris. And he said that that was like the big sort of disappointment of his life and his career. He was really, really hard on himself after that. He's Somali by birth, Dutch citizen, came to the Netherlands as a refugee, lived for a while in Syria as well with his family. So like this guy's seen a lot and been around the block, really good runner. And he said that he knew going into this race, even though he's done the race now 4 times, that he was not a favorite going in. He was like, nobody was talking about me. And he's like, all of my training leading up to this for the 11 weeks since the Paris Marathon, Paris Olympic Marathon, was I am going to make sure that people know my name after the end of this race. And he was like, at 35K, I felt amazing. So I was like, I know I'm going to win this thing, which is kind of a cool thing. The guy's like, he's like, I know in my mind right now that I got this thing in the bag with 7K to go.
And he was the only one to believe that. Like, totally true. He was the best runner in this field that no one talked about. And I wouldn't blame anybody. Yeah, Nagier is a veteran of New York City, but the field that surrounded him were like just next level. They were past champions, right? You had Jeffrey Kamworor, who had won twice in New York, Tola, defending champion, Albert Career, who won in 2021, Evans Chebet, who won in 2022. And then you have your Connor Mance, Clayton Young, who are the American the American contingent, right, that people are focusing on. And turns out all of these names that we just mentioned finished 2 to 7. So it's not that they didn't show up. They showed up, but Nagier was just better. At the end, I was, so I've become really invested in the shoe game right now because I got to try these Adidas Pro Evo ones, and they feel amazing. And I'm like, are they going to take over the entire elite running scene? Have they already taken over? Nagier wore the Alpha Fly 3s. So I don't know. I feel like when I just saw Chebet, Career, Tola, and Nagier as the final four, I had already counted Nagier out. I was giving it to Tola. And then it was Chebet and Nagier. I was giving it to Chebet. So no, I'm guilty of it like everybody else. I never thought Nagier would take the win up until he broke the entire field.
Yeah, it was a bit of a strange thing to watch in the last few kilometers. It did sort of seem like Nagier and Evans Chebet were like going for like an easy, friendly run. Like they were side by side. Neither of them seemed to be grimacing or struggling at all. It seemed like it was a very reasonable pace for both of them, and they were just kind of running next to each other. Like they didn't talk, but if they were chatting, I could have been convinced that they were just going for a nice little like shakeout run the day before the marathon in the last mile of the friggin' race. But yeah, I think that actually probably, besides obviously Niguez with the big win on the men's side, the story has also got to be like this dude Albert Career, who's just like a grinder, man. Like he just can't. He was, I think, at one point he fell back to something like 6th place, and he fought his way back, all the way back onto the podium, which I think that's actually very relatable for all runners of all ability levels. To try to salvage a race after it starts to go sideways in the last 10 kilometers of the marathon is just one of the most difficult things to do in sports, right? It's so mentally and physically challenging to kind of bring yourself back from the dead with about 30 minutes of running to go in his case, right? Or 40 or 50 or 60 for us mere mortals. So for him to actually kind of like pull himself out of the grave and grab 3rd place in New York was super cool. Let's delve right into the women's race, which I think in many respects was a more entertaining and exciting race, certainly in the last few miles, with that great sort of head-to-head battle between Sheila Chepkirui, who ended up winning the race, and obviously the reigning champion no more, Hellen Obiri. Alex, I was convinced with a mile to go that Obiri had it because of what we saw in Boston this year, her crazy final kick in the last mile. But it turns out she's human, and turns out it's really hard to go back to back in marathons in under 12 weeks and have anything left to throw at it in the last mile.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give it to you, Michael. You corrected yourself pretty quickly after that mile because you posted in our Slack. You said Chepkirui's got this. Oh God, Chepkirui's going to win. So you came to that sense before I did because it seemed in that and I know we're skipping over the first 5-10K, but that last mile seemed exactly like an Obiri race. Now, the fun fact about Obiri is even though she has 3 major victories in the last year, 2 Bostons, 1 New York, she has not run faster than 2:23 in the marathon. When the women's world record is 2:09, you put that in perspective and you think, how can someone who wins so much run so slowly comparatively, right? And so this is a slower race. It's a gamer race, and this is why Obiri's good, is she's a gamer. And so I thought this is just the perfect formula for her to just like use her gamesmanship and her kick at the end and take the win. So Chepkirui, hats off to her. I did a bit of digging on her because I had to. Like, she wasn't that much of a huge name on the marathoning scene. She's been around the sport forever, but on the track and even in the youth range, she competed in a World Youth Championship back in 2005 and 07. Ended up having like this longer track career and is now just testing herself on the marathon. And so it's been, I think, a long, relatively fruitless career for her on the world stage, on the very top stage. And to see her get to the podium is like, got to give it to her. She's got some dog in her.
Yeah, in our live updates that we were doing of the race, one of my comments that I added was that like she really needed, and this win became is going to become a career defining win for her. Now, hopefully for her case, she goes on to use this as like a way of to kind of catapult her into racing more majors and having more success in majors now that she knows she's got that confidence and knows how to win one. But yeah, she's somebody who wasn't really on many people's radar beforehand. I mean, coming in, she had a pretty good seed time entering the race. I think she'd run a total of 4 marathons, including New York just today. So, and especially going up against somebody who's like, as this was said in the press conference afterwards, when the 3 podium finishers in the race were sitting on the stage here, is that, you know, for some like she'll be side by side with Hellen Obiri, who's like a living legend. You know, she's had an incredible track career, and then she's also won a bunch of majors, and she's got an Olympic marathon medal coming into this race as well. Like, you know, that would be. I think about this, definitely did. I would say Obiri had herself positioned in the last couple of miles to win the race. You could just tell she didn't have like, she just didn't have that extra little bit, that extra step to get that inside line. I mean, she was tactically running a very smart race. She just didn't have it. And also, I would say, kind of delve into the kind of shoe game a little bit. On the women's side, it was a little bit of a more interesting battle, right? It was, yes, it was Adidas on the top of the podium, which we've seen a lot of this year. I'm not sure if she was wearing the Pro Evo or if she was wearing the new Adios Pro 4, which is a slightly different shoe, not to confuse things further. Puma did really well. Vivian Cheruiyot, the Masters runner, because she's over 40 now. She's sort of come back from, she had a great career a couple of years ago, and then took a couple of years off, started a family, and seemed like she was out of the sport. And Puma picked her up, and she got 3rd place today. So at one point in this race, there was like, I think I counted like 6 Puma athletes in the women's lead pack. So, you know, they were kind of in the cross country race, race right there. So, yeah, they had a great day, and certainly on the Swiss brand that reps Hellen Obiri, they can't be dissatisfied with their new intriguing super shoe taking the silver medal in New York.
Yeah, weird how on the women's side it seemed to be, other than Obiri's on, it was Puma versus Adidas. Like that was the cross country race. On the men's side, it was just full of Alpha Flies. So it was Adidas versus Nike on the men's, Adidas versus Puma on the women's. You might be able to draw a little conclusion that Adidas won the marathon in terms of shoes, but I find it cool that Puma's in the mix. It extends this idea of like parity inside of the super shoe game, which I think is important to hold on to.
Yeah, certainly, absolutely, and I would say also, you know, like, not to go down the super shoe gearhead rabbit hole too much, but I think this just goes to show, in some respects, as much as we like talking about like the advantage certain shoes have over others, and there's certainly, I think, a sense when you look at the grand scheme of things, when we take a big snapshot of 2024 overall and take a look at the landscape of how shoes performed, and not just on the elite level, but also on the sub elite and then the recreational level as well, is that there is a lot more parity, but also I think clearly the Alpha Fly 3 and the Pro Evo, which you've had a chance to run in, I have not, are currently kind of top of the leaderboard, the bleeding edge. You know, we like to use the word hyper shoe. It's kind of like an elevated super shoe, you know, the top technology that these companies are throwing at these shoes. So yeah, I mean, let's pivot into overall here. You know, in many ways, New York is sort of like the cap, the end, the denouement, whatever word you want to use, of the marathon running season. We've got Valencia coming up in December, which actually is going to be a really intriguing race, I think, for a lot of reasons. But this is the final World Marathon major of this season. We're wrapping this up. I think it ended on a pretty good note. I think they were 2 solid races. I wouldn't say they were 2 like absolutely jaw-dropping races. I think we had a lot more drama in Chicago, and obviously with the world record intrigue, that was really interesting. But overall, I think New York was just like a really nice day and a really nice event for a lot of runners. I don't know what our head count's going to be for finishers, but I think it's going to certainly be close to or over 50,000 people. So we've got another mega marathon happening this fall, and just a beautiful day. I mean, this is like it's just a killer city to run in, man. It's like such a nice city to be in, and the course is so beautiful, and there's so many people come out to the race that it's just a really cool environment to be in.
Well, even watching from home, I think there are two types of marathons. Those where someone breaks away early and you feel like you don't have to watch the end. You can tune in early because you already know what's going to happen. This was the other kind, a full race, which got more exciting as the minutes ticked on the men's and the women's side. Massive negative splits. You could really tell that it was a race. Sometimes it's nice to have time goals go out the window because then you can just focus on beating the person next to you, and it ends up making for better TV. So as a viewer of it, even away from New York, it was awesome to watch. I gotta shout out to Galen Rupp and the crew on the broadcast, and it was good to have a little bit of elite flair along with just overall regard for the race. Yep, I think kudos to the broadcast team too. I remained entertained, and also I gotta say this: the TCS app. Okay, big shout out to the TCS app. They do a really, really good job. They have a few major marathons. I think they have London and New York. They also do Toronto here. They probably have more. It's a really good way to watch. There's a live stream right on the app. There's no commentary. It's just straight up live stream of the elite athletes. I tuned in for a lot of that and was able to track runners on it. Like TCS, like keep doing that because that's a good way to get people to see marathons from home with all the honestly the shit show that's trying to find where the stream happens every time.
You just killed our clean rating there. I've got to put the old E. My wife is going to be so disappointed yet again. She always gives me a hard time every time we swear on the podcast.
God, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of go through the experience a little bit. My wife was actually, she's running the race. She just finished. So I got to wrap up this pod and go find her somewhere here, but it's just a very organized race. Very, it's a well-oiled machine. This race has been going on since 1970, many different iterations. It's been a big, massive race for many, many years. Even this morning, going out to the buses at the New York City Public Library in Midtown to take the bus to go to Staten Island. You got to leave like a million years before the race starts to take the big sojourn to Staten Island to start the race. But it's just so well organized. There's like thousands, like tens of thousands of people streaming in around the block on 52nd Street, I think it was, and Fifth Avenue to get their bus. And it seems like a situation where it would be like kind of an unruly scenario where you wouldn't be able to get so many people so efficiently through and onto buses and moving. But they just nail it. Everyone gets there on time. Everything's very orderly, very organized. It's like again, very well-oiled machine. And just the city knows how to put on a big, massive show. So great race, great day. I'm kind of looking forward to going around and like experiencing the post-marathon vibe. It's the one race, like wearing the finisher's medal can be a little cheesy, especially if you're like at a smaller race or a smaller city. But like it feels like New York's the race where it's like, no, man, you put on the finisher's shirt, you put on the finisher's medal. Doesn't matter who the hell you are. I can guarantee you, even the elites will be rocking their finisher's medal. I've seen it before in the past in this city, so it's great. You sort of get like the 50,000 plus people that finish this race today are going to get kind of treated like celebrities, every single one of them, in restaurants and bars here. So pretty great day overall. Finishing thoughts here. Oh, I've got a little breaking news. Got a little bit of breaking news. I don't know when I'm going to put this. We're going to put the podcast up in pretty short order. I'm going to try to see if I can crank it out right after we're recording at 1:13 p.m. And we were told before the press conferences start to stick around until 2 p.m. because Abbott is going to show up and do a press conference of their own that was previously unscheduled. And I chatted with some folks. I don't want to name names because I don't want to get anybody in trouble. But they're going to announce that they're adding at least one race to the World Marathon Majors. My guess would be Sydney. That's what we reported on previously, that deal was all but done. I would imagine it's only one race, only Sydney this year, but obviously there was a race in Shenzhen province in China that they had been testing, as well as the Cape Town Marathon as well was sort of in the testing phase with Abbott. So if you're obsessed with the whole 6-star finisher thing and you're chasing after the 6-star medal, it's going to turn into a 7-star medal, and then it's probably going to turn into an 8 or a 9-star medal as well. So they're going to break some hearts here in a few minutes in New York, letting the 6 World Marathon majors that they've in fact not, and there's going to be a 7th World Marathon major, but it sounds like Sydney's going to get added to that list. So get out your welder's gun and fuse that Sydney medal to your 6-star medal if you've already got one.
So 45 minutes between now and then. Michael, go find your wife, congratulate her, and apologize for me for swearing on this podcast.
I will. All right, we're going to wrap this one up. This is not the end for us covering New York. We're going to probably crank out a few different stories over the next couple of days. I know I went and met the robot that made Hellen Obiri's shoes.
Yeah, we need to know about this another time, but we need to know about this.
I'm going to do a story around that. I think we're even going to have a video around that because I got to wear the shoes as well. I got to run in the shoes very briefly, although we've been promised we're going to get some test repairs coming our way into the Marathon Handbook testing lab. So we've got a lot of content coming out. If you don't subscribe to the podcast, obviously do so and give us a rating and a review. And the newsletter. We're going to push out the newsletter. We're going to do a breaking news send today. And we usually send the newsletter Monday to Friday to 160,000 people. So if you don't subscribe to that, it's unique content every single day that we send out. Get it at 5:05 Eastern Time in your inbox. All right, Alex, I am going to break down the kit and get the hell out of this media room that I've been living in for the last, it feels like 3 days now, but it's been about that. All right. Thanks very much.
Thanks for tuning in.